Hi, welcome back to the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. I'm Jesus Ramirez. In this video, I'll go through all the new features in the June release of Photoshop 2020. By the time that you watch this video, the update will be available. If you still haven't received it, then go into your Creative Cloud app, click on the Updates tab, and from the three-dot icon on the top right, select Check for Updates. This update will not delete your presets or plugins, so you don't have to worry about that. The first update you will notice is the new Photoshop splash screen. It still uses the same photo by my good friend Vanessa Rivera. Adobe has done a complete brand redesign. There is a new Creative Cloud logo and a new Photoshop icon as well. What do you think about the redesign and the new logos and icons? I don't mind the new Photoshop icon, but I do like how the old icon stood out against the taskbar on my desktop better, and even over the thumbnails on my YouTube videos. But these are just aesthetic changes. Why don't we jump right into what actually changed inside the application and what has been added? There are 5 big changes: the Adobe auto-activated fonts, improved match fonts, a better select subject algorithm, rotatable patterns, and the newly redesigned Camera Raw. First, let's look at some of the changes that are going to happen behind the scenes. In other words, changes that you wouldn't necessarily notice unless someone pointed them out to you. We'll start with the Adobe auto-activated fonts. There's not much to show really, but I do want to mention it. If you open a Photoshop document with missing Adobe fonts, Photoshop will no longer show you the missing fonts dialog box. Instead, it will automatically find and add the available Adobe fonts to your library. It's as simple as that. You won't even notice it. It all happens behind the scenes and it's on by default. If you use fonts from other sources, Photoshop will no longer message you when you open your document. Instead, you will receive the missing fonts message only when you edit the respective type layer. The whole point is that you can get to your work faster without having to deal with dialog boxes and syncing fonts. Another new feature with type that also happens behind the scenes is the improved match font feature. It now supports more fonts, vertical text, multiple line detection. If you want to learn more about how the match font feature works, check out my tutorial on matching fonts in Photoshop. I'll place a link in the description. Now let's get our hands dirty and let me show you how this third new feature works, which is the improved select subject algorithm. Adobe Sensei is getting smarter. The select subject command has been optimized for portraits. Select subject now automatically detects a person in your portrait to create a more refined selection with fine hair details and better edge quality. All this happens behind the scenes. You don't have to activate it or check any boxes. All you have to do is have a portrait layer selected and go into Select and Subject. Photoshop will automatically apply this new algorithm and make a selection. To better see the results, you can click on the layer mask icon to create a mask. I know that it's difficult to see, but when you compare it to how the old algorithm works, there is a significant difference. The layer below my currently selected layer was masked using the old algorithm. I'm going to click on the eye icon to enable this layer and click on the space here to enable the eye icon and bring back this PS 2020 layer. I want you to notice that the selection is very similar, but notice her hair on these areas, and you'll see how that selection will be much better on the newer version of Photoshop. I'll click on the eye icon and you can see how much better this selection is. If I enable the eye icon on the layer below, you can see the difference. It's a subtle change, but the algorithm is much smarter. And I predict that the algorithm will get much better and Photoshop will be able to make better selections with each new release. I also want to point out that the same algorithm is applied to the Properties panel's quick action under Remove Background. If I click on that, Photoshop will make that same selection and apply a layer mask automatically. And you can see how it compares to the old algorithm. The fourth new feature in this Photoshop release is one that you can see right off the bat, and I think it's a welcome one. This new feature is the ability to rotate patterns. I know I've been wanting this for a while, and I'm happy to see that Adobe added it to Photoshop. Let me show you how it works. From the Layers panel, I'm going to go into the new Adjustment or Fill layer icon and select Pattern. I'll click on a drop down and select a different pattern, maybe this trees pattern here just so that it's easier to see. And the new feature is here. You can adjust the angle of the pattern. So if I click and drag this icon, you'll see now how the pattern has rotated, and you can rotate it any way that you like. You can obviously drag the icon like I've been doing so far, or you can enter a number in the input box. I also want to point out that this feature is available with a layer style. So if you double click to the side of the layer to bring up the layer style window, you can click on pattern overlay to apply a pattern, and you'll notice the angle option here. I'll select the same tree pattern, maybe bring down the scale a little bit so that the leaves are easier to see. And you can also adjust the angle by clicking and dragging on this icon. Now let's talk about the fifth and best new feature in the Photoshop 2020 June release, and that is the newly redesigned Camera Raw. Let me show you how it works. This is the document that I'll work with, and with my layer selected, I'm gonna go into Filter, Camera Raw, Filter, and this will open up the newly redesigned Camera Raw. I think it looks great, as I already mentioned, and one of the first things that I'll point out is that we have this icon here on the top right to enter the full screen mode, which I really like. So I'll click on that, and that expands the Camera Raw filter to cover the entire screen. And when I'm working in Camera Raw and I zoom in, I have a lot more room to work with. Also notice that we no longer have the icons here on the top left. They have now been placed either on this toolbar on the right or within the panels. For example, we no longer have the geometry buttons here. Instead, we have a geometry panel here, which is where you will find the tools to adjust the perspective distortions of your photo, which is very similar to the panel inside of Lightroom. So the Camera Raw filter now looks a lot more like Lightroom, and I really like that. One of the other big changes is, of course, how the panels are laid out. You will notice that we no longer have these horizontal panels going across the top. We have panels going down this list, and you can click on one of these panels to open them up and then adjust the settings within that panel. Also, I want to point out that when you make an adjustment to an image, and the adjustment I'm going to make is not important, I'm just going to make an adjustment. When you make an adjustment, the eye icon next to the panel name lights up, and when you click and hold on that eye icon, you can see what the image looks like without the adjustments applied in that panel. So anytime you make an adjustment to a panel, the eye lights up. Click and hold to see the image without the adjustments in the panel. It's a really helpful feature that I really like. Another thing is that if you hold the Alt key on Windows, that's the Option key on the Mac, all the panels get this reset button, and you can click on reset to reset all the adjustments inside of that panel. So that is a handy keyboard shortcut to remember. Another interesting change in the detail panel is that now we have this notice here that says to zoom into the 100% view to get an accurate representation of the changes that this panel contains. And I'm only pointing it out because I always talk about that in my tutorials. If you've seen any of my tutorials where I apply sharpening, I always mention this, so I'm glad to see that Adobe put a notice on this panel. Another big change is that we no longer have an HSL panel. It is now the color mixer panel. And when you open up the color mixer panel, you'll see the old HSL adjustments, but there's quite a few changes that I really like. For example, we have an additional tab. Before we just had hue, saturation, luminance. Now we have an all tab. So you can click on all and you'll see all these sliders. So you no longer have to click on each individual tab. But even better than that, I actually like the color mode as opposed to the HSL mode. So the color mode works a lot more like the color mode inside of Lightroom, where you can select a particular color and then adjust the hue, saturation, and luminance of that color. I prefer that, so this is how I'm going to have mine set up. But if you're used to the old way of working, you can always keep the HSL option and then select the corresponding tab and adjust the corresponding slider. But again, I prefer color, so that's what I'll select. The one advantage of using the HSL tab over the color mode is that with the HSL tab, we have this target adjustment tool. So I can click on that target adjustment tool and click and drag on an area to adjust the colors that are in the area that I'm clicking and dragging on. In this case, the reds and the oranges. And of course, the change happens in the corresponding tab. In this case, the luminance tab. If I click on hue and click and drag on the same area, I will adjust the hue of those reds and oranges. But again, I like working in the color mode, and that's what you will see on my tutorials. One new addition to Camera Raw that I think you'll enjoy is the hue controls for local adjustments. So with any of the local adjustment tools like the brush tool or the graduated filter or the radio filter, you'll have a new slider. Let me show you how it works. I'll click on the adjustment brush tool, and I'm just gonna paint over her dress like so. And if you want to see what you paint on, you can always enable the mask. So that's what I painted on right there. And the new tool is down here. If I scroll down, you will see it right here, the hue section. I can click and drag on this hue slider to adjust the color of her dress. See that? So this is how I would change her dress from red to blue, and I can continue painting on it to make it blue. Obviously, I'm not going to spend the time to paint the entire dress in this tutorial, but this is how you would change colors inside of Camera Raw. The fine adjustment checkbox just makes it so that when you click and drag on this point, you just go much slower. See that? I'm just going very slow. That is just to make some fine-tune adjustments. And you can uncheck it and go much faster, of course. This is a really handy feature. It's been available in Lightroom for a while now, and it's now available in Adobe Camera Raw. Perhaps the most powerful new feature in this Photoshop release is the ability to create ISO adaptive presets. These are presets that react differently depending on the ISO that your image was shot. To show you how the ISO adaptive presets work, I'm going to open up Adobe Bridge, and from here I have 3 photos. I have this first photo that has an ISO of 400. Then this image has an ISO of 800, and finally this one an ISO of 1600. The content is not really important or the adjustments. I'm just going to show you how these ISO adaptive presets work. So I'm going to select the image that has an ISO of 400, hold Control, Command on the Mac, and click on the photo that has an ISO of 1600. Then I'm going to right click and select Open in Camera Raw. This will open up both images in Camera Raw, and what you need to do is hold Control, Command on the Mac, and click on the second image to have both selected. Make sure that the focus, the white outline, is on both images. Then from here, I'm going to go into the basic panel, and in the basic panel, I'm just going to make some adjustments. Again, for this tutorial, the final look is not that important. I just need to make some adjustments to show you how this feature works. So I'm just going to brighten up the shadows, darken the highlights, add a little bit of vibrance, a little bit of saturation, and I'm also going to go into the effects tab and add a vignette. Again, the effect is not important to show you how these adaptive presets work. Now, pay close attention. What I'm going to do now is go into the detailed panel, and from here, I'm just going to add a noise reduction of 10. And what I'm going to do now is simply click on this image, the one that has an ISO of 400. And I'm going to bring the noise reduction down to 0. So all the adjustments are the same except for this last adjustment. Again, the image with an ISO of 400 has a noise reduction of 0. The image that is an ISO of 1600 has a noise reduction of 10. So that's the only difference. So again, I'm going to select both images. Click on this image, hold Control, Command on the Mac, and click on the second one to add it to the selection. You can see the white focus, this white outline around both images. Then you'll notice that the noise reduction is completely blank here, which is good. That means that they're different and not the same. Then I'm going to go into the presets panel, and I'm going to click on this icon to create a new preset. And right at the bottom, you'll see the ISO settings. Make sure that this is checked. If this option is grayed out, it means that you don't have both images selected or that both images have exactly the same settings. And what we're going to do now is create a preset that will apply the same adjustment, but if there is a difference in ISO, it will apply a difference in noise reduction. What I'll do now is give this a name. I'm just going to call it ISO Adaptive Test, and I'm going to create a new group simply called ISO Adaptive. That way I can have a group that holds all my ISO adaptive presets. I'll press OK, and I'll press OK one more time, and you can see my group here with my preset. What I'll do now is just cancel this, And what I'm going to do is now select all these images, including this one that has an ISO of 800. So I'll hold Control and click on all of them. So now they're all selected. Then I'll right click and select Open in Camera Raw. And I can go into my presets panel and make sure that all my images are selected. So again, I'll hold Control and click on them all and add that preset. And you'll notice that the images change. If I go into my edit panel, you'll see that in the basic adjustments, we have all these changes that we made earlier on all those images. But if I select one image at a time and show you the noise reduction, you'll see that they're all different. The one that has an ISO of 1600 has a noise reduction of 10. The image that has an ISO of 400 has a noise reduction of 0. But the cool thing is that this image here, the one with an ISO of 800, will have a noise reduction of 5. So Photoshop is doing the math behind the scenes to adapt to the ISO. And those are the big 5 updates to Photoshop in the June 2020 release. There's also a few other small changes and bug fixes, of course. Let me know in the comments below what you thought about this new release. Which is your favorite new feature? If you enjoyed this video, click on the like button now and make sure that you also click on the subscribe and notification buttons to make sure that you don't miss any new Photoshop tutorials. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you again in the next video.